Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 78 of Ask the CEO with Abraham Gatile. Today, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. He has over 20 years in the IT industry across a variety of technology-focused roles. He was recently asked to return to Microsoft to build a new team in Azure engineering called Industry Experiences. The team is focused on helping industry customers and partners with their move to the cloud. Prior to Microsoft, he was the CTO at Milliman, where he and his team built one of the largest solutions that exists on Azure today called Integrate for Actuarial Modeling and Financial reporting. Prior to that, he led the global cross-industry partner team at Microsoft. He is in popular demand at Microsoft to talk about cloud because of his extensive experience developing solutions in the cloud, as well as working with some of the largest customers worldwide on their move to the cloud. It is my pleasure to welcome the one and only Paul Mahr. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. So, Paul, I'm really excited to be speaking to you. I had the pleasure of interviewing two of your team members for previous episodes of Ask the CEO. We had David Holding for episode 67 and Diego Tamburini for episode 70. Can you tell us a little bit about your team? What is Industry Experiences? And just tell us a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So the Industry Experiences team is a team that resides within Azure engineering here over at Microsoft. And specifically, me personally, I'm based over here in Redmond. But as you can tell from my strange accent, I'm originally from England in the UK. And I've described the role as really sort of having a dual function. Internally, I have a team of cloud and industry experts that are really helping us as we're building out the Microsoft Azure cloud, really think about the industry needs and ultimately make sure that we're building a first-class cloud platform for industry, especially as they think about digital disruption and digital transformation. And then the second part of the role is really externally focused, which is really where the fun comes in, which is really being immersed within industry. And specifically, the team at the moment currently focuses on financial services, so that's both banking and insurance, healthcare, manufacturing, and retail. And so in those external activities, kind of our goal is really to immerse ourselves within industry. So we'll do that by being involved in the community. So we're involved in a lot of industry memberships and boards and institutions. We participate a lot in industry events, whether it be participation or speaking. But really, that's an opportunity for us to get close to customers and partners to really understand and build an empathy of what they're trying to achieve. We're all about how do we get out through scale. So you'll see us doing a lot of work online. So that might be through social, so things like Twitter and LinkedIn, talking again about industry and as you mentioned earlier, helping customers and partners with their move to the cloud. So we'll be talking about sort of the on-point trends. So what's topical, what are the needs, and how can we help with Microsoft Azure Cloud? And we'll also get involved in some targeted, what I'll call sort of technical engagements, where we'll sort of roll up our sleeves and work with customers and partners in a more depth technical way, understanding their business problem and providing much more hands-on guidance on how to move to or build solutions on the cloud. So that's really sort of the duality of the role internally. How do we provide an industry perspective and ensure that we're really delivering a first-class platform, cloud platform for industry? And then externally focused, how do we get immersed in industry and in the community through sort of in-person and through our online engagements?
Great. So now for those of our listeners who may be new to Microsoft Azure, can you just tell us a little bit about what Azure is and what can you do with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, most people have probably heard the word cloud, whether they have a deep understanding of it or not. So Microsoft Azure is our cloud platform and associated services. So today we currently have data centers around 54 regions worldwide, which is the largest of the number of regions of all the cloud vendors. And if people would like to learn a lot more around specifically the Microsoft Azure cloud, I'd encourage folks to go take a look at www.azure.com. That's sort of really the landing page for Microsoft Azure. And there, from that homepage, you'll get everything from an overview of our cloud capabilities, services, through to things like educational materials, hands-on learning, training, and so on and so forth, as well as a list of our partner ecosystem. So that's partners who've built cloud solutions to solve industry problems today.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about cloud. So as you know, the trends are showing that companies are flocking to the cloud due to things like cost savings and other benefits. According to a report by a research firm called 451 Research, and I'll read you what they say, enterprise adoption of cloud computing has created a paradox. Although companies move to the cloud to take advantage of lower costs, most of them end up spending more on their cloud infrastructure than they did with installations in their own data centers. What's your take on this, and do you think it'll inhibit growth in the cloud?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually had an opportunity to have a quick look at the report, and it's an interesting paradox. I mean, I think some of the other data points that 451 Research actually sort of brought out is that if you kind of double click on what they're trying to really say here is that cloud is really inexpensive and is easily accessible as a technology to whether that be sort of developers building solutions on the cloud or to administrators perhaps moving on-premise infrastructure to the clouds. So number one, it's inexpensive, but it's accessible. So what this means as you kind of really sort of drill in on that point of view when they're talking about this paradox is that people are consuming more because of the cost savings, and but more importantly, I think what the other key kind of meta point is that they're potentially lacking controls and limits around kind of the cloud consumption. And then the other point that they made was waste of cloud resources as another factor. So, I mean, I think the paradox is more about the providing for those of you using the cloud, moving to the cloud, it's providing sort of governance controls and sort of making sure that there's an ongoing oversight, if you will, especially for folks that are new to the cloud, because the cloud really is providing huge upside, whether it be traditional IT providing services to their customers, whether that be sort of externally or internally. But now what the cloud is providing is accessibility to others to spin up their own instances and get accessibility to computing resources. So what that potentially can lead to is that what kind of traditionally has been good governance and control driven by perhaps IT, when it's been a managed resource, whether it be a sort of on-premise or within their data center, to now perhaps rogue projects being spun up that really aren't following a disciplined approach and having those controls. So I think it's just it's applying the common sense rule. It's applying the governance and controls. I don't think that's sort of necessarily an issue with cloud. It's more about the mindset and the operational excellence of moving from sort of on-premise to the cloud, and what that operational excellence and controls looks like in a cloud world. So kind of in summary, I would say governance and controls, just as you would think about that on-premise, is equally as important to managing costs in the cloud. And especially in the world with cloud, which is all about kind of utility computing in a pay-as-you-go model. So I don't think it's going to be necessarily an inhibitor, as long as the right investment is made and the right infrastructure is in place, and the right ongoing review is there to avoid sort of these unpleasant surprises.
Yeah, and which is why we're talking about it because like you said, it's really about how you use those resources.
Yep.
I come from a development background, so I started my career as a software developer, and what developers typically do is they've got their servers out there and it just runs 24/7, 365. With
Yep.
the cloud, because you're not paying for physical hardware, you have to pay another way and you pay for usage. So
Yes.
if you're working on a project and you have a holiday weekend, a 4-day weekend where you're not going to be in the office, you need to turn that off.
That's right. And they're a great. Just like go if you think back to your development background, you think about patterns and practices, and you work with your IT teams about provisioning hardware for you, and so on and so forth. I mean, the similar model needs to be in play, and there's great guidance out there. Around sort of patterns and providing things like being able to run monitoring tools and scripts, etc., to review, compute instances and VMs running and so on, and pull them down, if you so wish, and so on. So I think it's more of an education, and that, I say, building that operational muscle. Just as kind of whether you're, kind of some of the learning pains perhaps you had to go through on-premise, either with your own servers or if you were using data centers, and kind of applying that mindset to the cloud.
Now, is the cloud for everybody, or is there a certain business profile that's a best fit for the cloud?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I mean, I guess the best way to answer that is from my perspective. We're seeing all sorts of people that are using the cloud for varying needs. I mean, that could be anything from the large enterprises running sort of significant computational workloads, to a small business that perhaps is hosting a website, to even say a hobbyist developer that's standing up a development environment. So my general statement is cloud's open and accessible to all, and kind of that ability to provide kind of computational resources, really at a price point that fits in a pay-as-you-go model, I think is really what's enabling that variety. So I wouldn't necessarily say I would pigeonhole saying that there's one fit all. I would say cloud provides kind of a platform and services to the mass market, and we're seeing a diverse set of use cases and audiences that are actually using the cloud.
Great. So now let's talk about compliance. We all know about the new data protection regulation, GDPR, and the seriousness of not adhering to it. Yet this presents a new set of problems where businesses are incurring sometimes large expenses in order to get their environment compliant. What options does Azure provide for companies that have to be compliant without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first point I'd make is that Microsoft Azure was built with security and compliance at the heart. So we knew this was a key requirement. Kind of a few interesting facts, if you will. So Microsoft Azure has around 70 plus compliance offerings, ranging from things like GDPR to HIPAA to FedRAMP to SOC 1 and 2 to ISO, and the list goes on. In fact, we probably have the largest compliance portfolio in the industry. To kind of add to that, to show sort of, I think, the confidence that the industry has in us, 90% of the Fortune 500 companies trust their businesses on the Microsoft Azure cloud. And we have about 120,000 customer subscriptions onboarding every month. So, really compliance is at the center of how we've built the Microsoft Azure cloud, and we've been ongoing, really onboarding more and more compliance offerings, as I say. And to go learn more, because this is really a super important topic for all, especially those thinking about moving to and building solutions on the cloud, you can go take a look at the Microsoft Trust Center, and you can get that, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this, is you can go to azure.com, and off that you can get to the Microsoft Trust Center, and that will double click on what compliance certifications we have
And how do people get to the Microsoft Trust Center?
Yeah, so if you go to www.azure.com, and then once you get to that website, you'll see from that landing page, there's a big graphic that talks to our compliance offerings. And if you click on that, that will take you to the Trust Center.
Excellent. And this is really great that you mentioned this, because I think that this is probably the biggest incentive really towards using cloud. Because if you think about it, small businesses don't have the resources that a company like Microsoft has, but yet at the same time, they're still held to the same standards. You still have to be compliant. You still have to be responsible with your data. And we didn't even talk about cybersecurity, but that's also another concern. And a small company, or most mid-sized businesses, don't have those resources. And the fact that with just a few pennies, you can spin up a virtual computing resource, and you have access to the entire suite of benefits.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we've spent, kind of huge significant investments of kind of people and dollars to ensure that kind of we build with security and compliance in mind. And we have what I would say is an army of engineers, kind of really all seasoned professionals that, of course, being regulated in order to make sure that we really are secure by design. So I think the key takeaway, as you said, is that the benefits of investing in the cloud and kind of spinning up, say, a virtual machine of your picking of kind of processor and GPU and CPU and whatever else. You out of the box, you can feel kind of peace of mind that we are secure by design.
Great. So, Paul, this has been a really exciting conversation about Microsoft Azure, and a lot of our listeners are equally as excited. So we actually have several questions from the audience.
Great.
The first question is from Des Blanchfield. He's the founder and chief data scientist at Garaguru, which is a cloud consulting firm in Sydney, Australia. And by the way, he's also a host of a popular podcast called Conversations with Des. And awesome. For those that are interested, it's DEZ_BLANCHFIELD. So that's his Twitter, YouTube, and SoundCloud handle. And you guys could check him out. He's really awesome. So Des asks, has there been a noticeable post-GDPR increase in demand for and adoption of private and hybrid cloud from Microsoft's existing enterprise and government clients for Microsoft Azure through offerings such as the Microsoft and HPE Azure private cloud stack?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess a couple of things just to note. So, I mean, certainly it's probably worth, for those of you who don't know, kind of what is Azure Stack. So Azure Stack is an extension of Azure to really be able to consistently run hybrid applications on premise. So this addresses things like latency and connectivity requirements for, say, edge and disconnected solutions. It allows you to develop applications once and deploy on Azure Stack or on premise to meet regulatory and policy requirements. Or if there's a requirement around kind of updating and extending legacy applications to use modern Azure services on premise. So it provides sort of that really good kind of staging location either for compliance requirements or for sort of hybrid scenarios. So that's number one on sort of what is Azure Stack, just so everyone's clear. Probably another point I would kind of make around sort of just GDPR in general, because I know there's, and rightly so, there's been a lot of talk in the industry around GDPR. So, I mean, certainly at Microsoft, we're really committed to GDPR compliance across our cloud services, and we provide GDPR-related assurances in our contractual commitments. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And again, you'll see me refer back to www.azure.com, where you can go look at on the services, look for Azure Stack, and you can see kind of what we've done around compliance and so on. But I would say, kind of answering the question in this way. I mean, it's hard to sort of quantify as sort of GDPR really sort of driven momentum. It's certainly GDPR has driven lots of conversations, and rightly so. What I would say is, Azure Stack has been popular just in general, with for the aforementioned reasons across industries, and certainly GDPR has certainly been point of mind for many and led to many discussions around compliance and how Azure Stack can help with that. So, whilst it's hard to quantify, saying is it kind of is the trend and uptake of Azure Stack change because of GDPR? Azure Stack fulfills a need and has been very popular and has had great uptake in general. And certainly GDPR being within, kind of really driving that conversation around compliance requirements, and obviously Azure Stack helps there. Is definitely been a good talking point. So can't necessarily give any exact numbers, but what I can say is that there's been lots of GDPR conversations. Azure and at Microsoft, we're fully behind GDPR compliance. And we've certainly been having lots of conversations around GDPR and Azure Stack together.
As a follow-up, Des asks, where are you seeing the biggest gains? Is it in small, medium, or large businesses, or state and federal government?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, again, it's kind of hard to say one over the other, because, the requirements of the Azure Stack that it fulfills really is, we're seeing that across industries. I mean, certainly, I mentioned in things like, if you think about government and where there's requirements around compliance or, legacy applications and the need to drive hybrid scenarios, Azure Stack certainly is super popular. So again, it's kind of hard to quantify one over the other, but for the scenarios that I've mentioned where Azure Stack is sort of applicable, we've definitely seen lots of interest.
And then one last question by Des. Who have shown themselves to be the fast movers in the adoption and uptake of private Azure solutions?
Again, we're seeing uptake across the board. So that, I think this is kind of the key takeaway. I mean, I guess kind of rounding off the sort of the questions, because they kind of have a similar theme. I think number one, it's good for people to get familiarity with Azure Stack and where it plays. Number two, it's good to go take a look at sort of GDPR and sort of our commitment to GDPR and what that looks like. And then, I think just because of the maturity of kind of cloud and now with private cloud, we are generally seeing uptake across industries. So it's not one over the other. We're just across the board seeing really good uptake. But as you can imagine, they're scenario based. We're certainly seeing let's say kind of gravitas to things like Stack and private cloud. So where there are sort of strict requirements around compliance and kind of legacy solutions, or just the desire to kind of really keep data resident on premise. So those sorts of scenarios obviously are driving interest and usage of Stack. So not necessarily any one industry or any one sort of leading above the other, but you can imagine where, in particular, where sort of the security and compliance requirements, there's definitely a lot of interest.
Great. Our next question is from Ken Herron. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of intelligent IoT messaging company Unified Inbox in Orlando, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And says, hey, Paul, Microsoft is a big company, and Azure is an equally big platform. For those of us who aren't so big, what, please, is the process for us to get started?
Yeah. So, I mean, our whole idea is, Azure is we want to make it accessible. So, certainly, again, sort of www.azure.com is a great landing spot to get started. Number one, how do you go learn about cloud? That's a great location. So as you go to that landing page, you'll see there's things like learning materials. You'll see there's things like training and labs and so on to go educate yourself on what cloud is and sort of the Microsoft Azure cloud platform and services. In terms of getting to use the Microsoft Azure cloud, you'll see again from that landing page on Azure.com, you can go start a free trial. So that's a really the free trial is a really good way to kind of get your hands on using Azure, and just to give you kind of a bit more of a double click on that. So with that free trial, you get for free 12 months of the popular free services, $200 of credit to explore all services for 30 days. And we have around 25 plus services which are always free. So that, that's kind of a really good deal to get up and explore, whether you're trying to move, kind of build solutions, whether you're trying to, do things like websites, or you're trying to test out things like, kind of moving data or whatever. That's a great way to actually get up and running. And there's also great training partners out there. So you'll see, for example, on Azure.com, we've had a great partnership with people like Pluralsight, who do some really first-class training. So that's sort of video and audio sort of learning. And there are some great partner training organizations out there. So, cloud's been around for a while, and the great thing is that there's lots of learning curriculum that have been built. So I would encourage people to go take a look at that. And I mean, a big shout out for if you go to Azure.com and our hands-on labs that we have up on there, combined with the free credits, are a great way to walk through some guided training using the free subscription. So I think that's a really good way to sort of really kind of roll up your sleeves and explore what the Microsoft Azure Cloud has to offer.
Our next question is from Jake Metelka. He's the founder of the Sweet Corner in New City, New York. As a business owner in the wholesale retail used electronic industry, we have noticed trends in the used cell phone, tablet, and laptop markets. It seems that advances in technology and new feature launches have drastically slowed down, resulting in an increased interest in the used market. We are therefore led to believe these trends will lead to tech manufacturers slowing down the release of new models and put more focus in the virtual technologies, security, and blockchain. This will lead to an increased demand of used technology, which would allow electronics to hold value longer and create a growth in the used and refurbished industries. As an industry expert, would you agree with this statement? And please elaborate your thoughts for us.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, I mean, I think we kind of break it down a little bit. So I think the short answer is what you're seeing is much less of a requirement for high-end machines. So, with the ability to offload sort of processing and use things like virtualized environments, you're now, you're moving back to a little bit of like in the old days of sort of the dumb terminal kind of model, whereby you need much less processing power on the front end because you can offload that using the cloud. So I think, yes, in general, I think the need to sort of go bigger and buy more, and sort of constantly refresh electronics, that's probably a true statement, because a lot of the processing is not, now no longer being done necessarily on the client, but it's now being done on the client. And with, kind of rich capabilities around virtualization, you even, if I think, sort of from my own personal background, doing development, we're seeing kind of a trend where actually developers aren't necessarily now investing in, sort of large desktop or laptop machines to do development. Instead, they're actually setting up their development environments actually in the cloud, and so then the requirement on the client machine is much less, because all the heavy lifting and processing is being done on the cloud. So I think yes, and yes. With that, kind of the computing power, the richness around visualization, virtualization of applications, and so on, is meaning that potentially there's the ability to offload processing to the cloud versus needing as much processing power on the client. So that means in theory, the hardware can last longer. You don't necessarily need to refresh as much and so on. So I think that's probably an interesting from someone who's in that space and in that kind of the used electronic industry. I would you probably could imagine that you will see some trends where things will last longer and so on.
I love the way you put it, because if you think about it, we've come full circle since the mainframe. You used to have this client server architecture, and then it progressed towards everybody having their local computing power, and now we're back to the client server.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a good question. So it's one to watch closely, but a good question from Jake.
Great. Our next question is from Ian Moyse. He's a cloud influencer and director at cloud telephony provider Natterbox in London. Mm-hmm. Ian says, from a Microsoft perspective, cloud had transformed your business and become the core focus. Mm-hmm. Microsoft competitors have been changing through this to the likes of Google Apps and AWS, who are not traditional competitors. Mm-hmm. What should channels look out for, and what should we expect in the next phase of cloud disruption?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. So it's interesting as sort of the cloud vendor, we've disrupted ourselves with cloud in itself in terms of changing sort of our own business model, and where we see sort of driving opportunity. And of course, people, as mentioned, such as Google and AWS have a similar mentality. So I think what you're going to see is that there's going to be as hardware and capabilities around things like chipset and cost continues to come down, I think you'll see further opportunity for disruption in the marketplace through kind of capabilities that are being driven through the cloud vendors. So if we look at sort of leading indicators and some of the things that are sort of really hot today, and we try to sort of forecast tomorrow. So some things such as, so obviously if you think about cloud, you think about, computing capabilities and distributed computing and so on, and that's great, and being able to sort of scale up, scale down. But, if you think about things like the evolution of hardware and at a much cheaper price point as well, and the evolution of things like algorithms and so on. So if I think about sort of artificial intelligence as an example, that's been around for many years, but due to sort of hardware requirements and kind of capabilities around the algorithms, perhaps it kind of reached a plateau. And now with new advances, kind of around the both areas, sort of the hardware and the algorithms, we're seeing sort of really never before seen capabilities and opportunities being kind of arising from artificial intelligence as an example. So I can see that that's really sort of a hot trend, and will continue, where people continue to look at how can we disrupt kind of industry with say artificial intelligence. How can artificial intelligence really do much more? If I was to think of something kind of radical that I was hearing the other week, using artificial intelligence to actually develop code as an example, and learn and evolve. So you can see sort of AI, as I say, is probably one of those things I would forecast. You've got things like blockchain is obviously an interesting technology that really sort of has surfaced. So I think it's finding its way at the moment in terms of its place and its use cases, and that's being driven, rightly so, through things, kind of consortiums, industry consortiums, to kind of validate real needs. But I think you'll see that blockchain as sort of another interesting technology that will further evolve. And it's a hard one to predict, but if you think about sort of the ability to, sort of, you think about virtual reality and augmented reality and what that can do, combining it with things like artificial intelligence and, kind of with the cloud being able to consume large amounts of data and traverse and interrogate that data more so than ever before. So I think gleaming insights from data using things like artificial intelligence and being able to surface insights and really provide kind of the abilities and capabilities to visualize through things like virtual reality and augmented reality could be kind of further interesting technologies. And then, of course, probably the big one that is sort of the buzz of what's coming next, which has been sort of announced by ourselves and some of the other vendors is quantum computing. And so, if you think about what kind of cloud computing brings today, if you think about then quantum computing, that then just takes things to the sort of the whole next level. So that's one that if you sort of it's a little bit out there, but there's a it's real from the point of view of Microsoft and others are making kind of real investments in quantum computing and what that kind of what that looks like in the hardware and how to actually kind of make that a reality. That's sort of the prospect of that is pretty exciting. So that's in that sort of 5 to 7 year horizon. It would be interesting to look back to see kind of across the vendors, have we really sort of being able to realize quantum computing. So they're probably some of the things I would kind of sort of the technologies I would call out, some of which are here today, but I think will evolve with things like AI and augmented reality and virtual reality and blockchain. But I think they'll mature and evolve in terms of their use cases and their adoption. And then sort of 5 to 7 years out, thinking about quantum computing, who knows when it'll come in. Maybe it'll come in sooner, maybe it'll come in after. But I think the potential that quantum computing could bring then takes cloud computing to the next level.
Yeah, if you think about it, like you mentioned with AI writing code, so you've got AI creating new AI.
Mm-hmm.
With quantum computing coming out, that's going to take it to an exponential level.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, exciting times, right?
For sure. So, Paul, how do people connect with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way, first of all, you can follow me on LinkedIn. So just search for Paul Mahr. You can follow me on Twitter, so Paul GF Mahr. And then finally, if you want to reach me via email, you can email me at paul.mahr@microsoft.com.
Great. And I'll post that to the show notes so people can just click on that and get right to you.
Awesome. That would be great.
Great. Paul, do you have any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
Parting words of wisdom. I think the main thing is cloud is here and now. So I would encourage anyone to really if you're not familiar or you don't have the kind of basic understanding of cloud, go do some reading, go do some research. I think that's kind of really important because whether it be kind of a large enterprise and industry to just in our everyday lives. I mean, cloud is really sort of becoming more and more prevalent and part of our daily lives, if you will. So that's number one. Go get familiar with cloud and build that basic understanding. The second, again, I'll kind of put the pitch out there. Go to learn more about the Microsoft Azure cloud. Go to www.azure.com, and everything is there to help you get educated and get up and running with the free trial. So you'll see from the landing page, you'll see kind of the easy links to kind of learning about our services, to starting the free trial, to doing things like hands-on labs and learning and so on and so forth. So go do that. Get familiar with Azure.com. There's a lot of investment gone in there to help people get familiar with that. And then finally, for those of you in IT making decisions about moving to or building solutions in the cloud, I would say really start to build a deep understanding of the cloud, especially if you're the decision maker, know your motivation to move to the cloud, and learn from others. Because learning from others will help you have a successful journey to the cloud. So they'd probably be my closing remarks.
Great. Paul, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me on the show.